Okay, so I would just like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which we stand today, the land of the Bedigal people, the unceded lands, I should say. And I hope we can all take a moment today or over the weekend just to connect to country in your own way and try and feel grounded in this beautiful land that we all share. Okay, so our agenda, we're going to start with an activity. We're going to go through what feedback literacy is, and then we're going through these 4 dimensions of feedback literacy that Carlos and Bowd created, and then we'll have a bit of a reflection. So we're setting it up that I'm doing the boring definition, and then Rita's giving you the interesting, good, practical strategies. So we have a QR code there for you. When you scan the QR code, you will be able to pull up a Miro board. So the Miro board has 6 different types of feedback on a paragraph about feedback literacy. And you'll see in the board, you are saying, what are the strengths and weaknesses of each type of feedback? Now, for each type, you can think about strengths and weaknesses for students, for the staff that are doing it, like what are the good and bad things from any perspective. If you're not familiar with Miro, you can zoom in. So in the corner, you can see I've got a little hand, so I can click and drag. If you're not able to click and drag, click the little arrow, and then it'll change. When the arrow is highlighted, you can't click and drag. When it's not, you get a hand and you can move it around. You can click text and add text. This is terrible. I don't even know which example that is, but you know. Or you can do a sticky note and you can choose different colors, which is very nice. Add your thoughts there. Okay, but to do all of that, you need to have the mouse selected. So make sure the mouse icon is blue, and then you can add text, add post-it notes. Beautiful. So as we saw in that activity, there's lots of strengths and weaknesses to different types of feedback for different people. So what's quick and easy for us as educators is probably not enough for students, but students, particularly the ones straight out of high school, are expecting a very high level of unrealistic level of feedback, and often place value on certain types of feedback. So when we're talking about feedback literacy, it's the understandings, dispositions, and capacities needed to make sense of information and feedback and use it to improve learning. So you can see it's not a straightforward definition. Feedback literacy is not something that's simple and we can just go, yep, it's done. It's something that goes over the whole course of the term of the year. It's something that is ingrained in everything you do. It's not just when we're giving assessment feedback. So when we talk about feedback literacy, there's actually responsibilities for teaching staff, for students, and then there's things that they do together. So you can see we've got teaching staff need to design feedback literacy interventions and activities. They need to facilitate times where this can be done. We need to provide feedback and guidance. We need to encourage the students to reflect and have those moments for self-reflection and self-analysis. We obviously need to assess things. And we need to support students in their use of feedback. Now you can see some of those things that I just said, the student also needs to do, because the student also needs to assess. They need to assess their own work and the work of others. They need to be able to collaborate with their peers. And that may be through breaking down an assessment rubric. It may be talking about areas of improvement. They need to be able to discuss feedback, have a bit of self-discussion, talk to their peers, and talk to teaching staff. You know, have that conversation if they're not sure about something. Obviously, teaching staff and students, we all want to improve at all times and improve the work that we're doing and improve feedback literacy and our learning outcomes. We have to engage with the process, and that's the big thing. If one side of this is not engaging, There's only so far you can get. So students need to work to understand the feedback they receive. It's not a passive process where you can just read it and it's done. They need to actually respond to feedback. So how are you taking what you've learnt and you're using it to generalize and to make improvements? And then they need to have that level of self-reflection, as I said before, of how could I generalize this feedback? How could this improve my work? And have a bit of self-reflection in the terms of, this is not a reflection on me as a person, because we get that a bit, particularly for students with ADHD, students with depression and anxiety. They often internalize feedback. It makes them think that it's me, I'm a bad person because I didn't do well on this assessment, which is obviously not true and a little bit illogical, but that's the truth of it. That's how some students process it. So these are the 4 dimensions of feedback that Carlos and Boud have identified. Now, there are lots of different researchers have used different dimensions. The reason why we've done this one is, 1, it's only a 1-hour workshop, and 2, these I feel are quite simple in terms of how we can look at feedback literacy as a holistic approach to feedback. And, you know, there were some others there's some that have like 30 dimensions and there's like sub-dimensions in there. It's crazy. So this one is a good place to start. If you do want to do further reading on feedback literacy, I personally really like Carlos and Boud's work. They have done quite a lot of publications on it. So I swear this is I will stop talking after this slide and then Rita's going to take over. So appreciating feedback. So this aspect focuses on how the student understands and appreciates the role of feedback in improving work and the active learning role that they need to take in this process. It recognizes that feedback comes in different forms and from different places. So that means it's verbal feedback, it's peer feedback, it's informal feedback throughout the classroom. So it's that understanding that feedback is not just written feedback with a rubric. Feedback is something that we get every day, that we get throughout the course, that you might get from your peers, you might get from yourself, you might get from your teacher. It might be written, it might be oral, all those sorts of things. And that they should use technology to access, store, and revisit feedback. Because that big revisiting, I think a lot of us would be able to confidently say a lot of our students don't do it. Or we assume they don't do it. We're not in their bedrooms, we don't know. But I think a lot of us would say. So these skills need to be explicitly taught because many students think that feedback is just being told what's good or bad, and either dismiss or devalue feedback that isn't written comments on submitted work. They might not recognize that it's actually valuable when it's outside those parameters. Now, Rita's going to give you some examples.
Thank you. All right, so before I take over, I would love to give you a very brief context to the example that I will be providing today. Some have been taken from my current teaching practice. Others, and especially the 2 examples that will be coming on the screen, have been taken from one of my, one of our Nexus project within the engineering faculty in feedback. So just to give you a little bit of context, when we started the Nexus project in terms of feedback, we realized the feedback can be analyzed from multiple angles. So we look at the feedback that teachers give to the students, but also the students giving feedback to the academics. And in this particular Nexus project, we focused on how we could leverage a midterm questionnaire to get the students' feedback on the quality of an academic teaching practice to improve the kind of activities that the academics did during the term, as well as improve the learning experience of the students. So the next 2 examples, and this builds on what Lucy just told us, is that usually students think that there is only one way of providing feedback, and it is the written form. So I'm going to just play 30 plus seconds of this video in which the academic that piloted our Nexus project did with the students. So essentially, okay, let's watch it first and then we comment it together.
Hi everyone, it's Lauren here, and in this video I'm going to talk through some of the feedback that you provided in class in week 5. Now before I start, genuinely thank you so much for providing this feedback. I know that you guys are surveyed to death and it can sometimes feel like it's a little bit of futile work, but I assure you that I've taken this feedback on board. I'm taking it very seriously, and I would love to continue working with you to improve your experience as well as the experience of future students.
So ask and then the slides.
Oh, that was the slide.
That was the slide.
Yep.
All right. So essentially, like I think this example is like fits perfectly in what Lucy was discussing, because to start the academics, what it does, she actually acknowledges the feedback of the students. She appreciates the time that the students have given to take part into the pilot project, but also there is this modeling where the students really are given different example on how feedback might be given and perhaps received. Another one, again, still taken from the Nexus project. In here, the academic instead decided to discuss the feedback in class. So in this particular example, the academics, apart from having the slide deck with the some of the summary of the feedback that the students provided, he also talked through. So these are two simple examples that really gives us a variety of options on how feedback can be given to the students, but also, again, how the students are giving feedback to the academics. And the other thing that I think it is quite important in terms of the process, feedback given at the end of a term, both for the academics and to the students, becomes transactional. In here, feedback given throughout the terms becomes like an ongoing dialogical conversation where, again, there is the responsibility of both the academic and the students to, I guess, engage with the feedback and having the kind of conversation. Back to you.
Amazing. And just to explore that further, like imagine if we didn't take on the feedback of the chat. Like so far, all of the online people would have dropped off because they wouldn't have been able to hear anything and there wouldn't be anything happening. So like even that's example of, informal feedback and pointing that out to students, having that transparency. So the next aspect is on making judgments. So this is all about how students are able to develop capacities to make sound academic judgments about their own work and the work of others. So this is building that capacity for peer feedback. They need to participate productively in the peer feedback process. So, if you have a student sitting there like, oh, it was good, like what is that going to do? And then to refine those self-evaluative capacities. So over time, so they can make more robust judgments. So a student in their first year, in their first term, is probably not going to be as strong providing peer feedback as they would be in year 4 when they've done a lot. So making judgments is an essential part of this, is because learners are more likely to improve and change when they recognize the change is necessary. So it's that mental thing of, if they disagree with your feedback or anyone's feedback on a fundamental level, they're not going to make any changes. If they think they're perfect, they're not going to make changes. And then that's something for us to consider as well when we're asking for student feedback. We need to be honest with ourselves and go, their perspective is valid. And if I'm asking for student feedback, I need to be able to have that recognize that, okay, like that is something that I need to improve. and that making judgments is essential to plan, draft, redraft, and improve work through the assessment development process. So that's that we're making drafts, we're going through, and if you do have an iterative assessment process, for example, where a student might submit a draft and that's 5% of their grade, then they submit, or they submit sections at a time, or you work on it within the classroom. All of that allows that process to be taught explicitly and supported.
All right, so the next two examples, again, in this case, come from my teaching practice. So one, as you can see, is self-assessment with rubrics. And I usually recommend this type of activity when students submit drafts. So for example, in this case, as I assume every academic, I have a rubric with the assessment criteria. And so the students, after they submit their draft, they usually complete a self-assessment activity where they actually reflect on how they have actually applied the marking criteria into their assessment, but also asking them to reflect on the strength and the improvement. And so then what happens is when they receive the teacher evaluation, then there is, again, like we open a discussion and there is this ongoing comparison between what the students have thought there was the work that they have submitted versus what the academic has assessed. And I guess in here, based on my experience, at times I hear the feedback from certain students, but I put so much effort in my assessment, but the effort does not somehow talk about the quality of the work. The other one is what I call an in-class review. And this one comes essentially from, is a strategy that I've started adopting because I'm very reluctant to provide exemplars to the students. For some students, exemplars are enablers. For others, primarily are constrainer, and they really box their way of thinking and even how to approach an assessment. So what I usually do, I ask the permission of previous students if I can actually use one of their assessments. So they are anonymous, they are unmarked. And so what we do, I allocate a little bit of time in the class to actually discuss the quality of the work. And so, and again, against the rubric. And so this one is just a way to get the student ability or having the attempt really to develop these self-assessment, the assessment ability of about their own work, hoping that they come out of the session with some learning lessons that then they can apply in their own work when they submit future assessments.
So I'm going to be a bit controversial here.
Sure.
And I loved getting exemplars as a student. So as a neurodivergent student, having the exemplar to read and to go against the criteria personally, but of course, all of teaching is a personal choice. So, and that they're still getting access to exemplars with Rita's example. And yeah, so that's a personal choice as well. If you want to give them the exemplars, you can. If you want to do that guided or even, you know, in small groups, having those examples and things like that, that's all possible. So I hope that was okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so managing affect. This is all those getting up in your feelings about the feedback, where we get those students that have those strong reactions to critical feedback. And if a student doesn't learn how to manage this, it means they're not going to reach out to ask for feedback proactively, because if they constantly feel like any sort of feedback is negative, then you're not going to, you know, go out and seek a negative experience. And that also means that, you know, if we have that, if we're striving to get more feedback and we're controlling our emotions, it means we can then have more growth, we can improve, and we can do all those great things. So without support, feedback can not only cause negative reactions, but threaten a sense of identity. So particularly if we think about students from equity cohorts, many students from an equity background, so for example, low SES, rural and remote areas, etc., they often already have a feeling that they don't belong. And so if they are then getting negative feedback, they're then going, well, I was right, I don't belong, I should just drop out. And I'm not saying that you need to be responsible for that, but managing affect is how we support students to work through that themselves. So we're kind of giving that scaffolding and guidance for them to learn that, you know, it's not about me as a person. And then, as we said before, they're going to lower their engagement and, you know, have less interactions with staff. If they get the idea that, oh, they're just going to be critical, you know, they're not going to want to talk to you outside of class or to ask for your advice or possibly even ask questions. So even that informal feedback in terms of asking a question in class, we all hear about students saying, oh, I don't want to ask this stupid question, which we all know there are no stupid questions. But, you know, by the way that we respond to questions in class, just even if it's wrong, oh, I can see how you came to that conclusion, but da, 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 da. And so it's like a soft, no, you're wrong. But, you know, we're guiding them towards the right one. Okay, Rita has some examples.
All right, so I guess there are many strategies that can be adopted to managing affect. So one that I use is trying to build a positive relationship in the first place with the students. And so I admit it does take time on the academic current workload. I tend to reach out to those students that perhaps I can start feeling they are a little bit struggling. And so what I do, I organize some regular and informal check-ins. And so the idea in there is that to start with, as an academic, I care about the students' perspectives, and I also acknowledge that perhaps if students are not necessarily clear about the feedback, maybe it could be as well that I haven't been clear enough. So really what I'm seeking is trying to support the students, but also to clarify whether, you know, my feedback was clear, whether it was actionable for the students, whether they need further clarification. And so again, this one shows the feedback is it's a process, and it does require it. In this case, like two, I guess, stakeholders, if we want to call it this way, the students and the teachers. The other one, which is building a feedback in a friendly environment through dialogue, it kind of has been inspired a little bit by one of the workshops that some Nexus fellow have organized for academics. So as you know, at the end of the term, each academics received a MyExperience survey. So I think Jackie and Daniela have organized like a 1-hour session where they get together the academics to really unpack the feedback and how they feel about it. So again, time permitting, what I do, again, I allocate 10-15 minutes within my teaching practice where I get the students to, in small groups, to discuss like in a very low-stake environment, how they feel about the feedback that they have received, trying just to create this environment where students feel comfortable to share how they feel about it, but again, trying to dissociate in a way the feedback from, I guess, the individual.
Yeah, and that's a great example. Generally, the Teaching Commons has those MyExperience things at the end of each term. So highly recommend coming along because it just creates a space where you can safely talk about and go, oh, that's frustrating, or oh, yeah, that's actually something that we could work through. And, you know, just going through this process like our students do, you know, what's things that I can generalize, what can I take into the next space? Okay, taking action. So this is how feedback literate students are aware that they actually need to do something with feedback. It's just an awareness that that exists. To draw inferences between lots of different feedback to be able to continuously improve, and then to develop a repertoire of strategies for improvement. So it's how it might be different for different students. So it may be that they get their feedback and they highlight key points that they want to take away or whatever it is. So it's that, because you might think, well, like, oh, what strategies would you have to engage with feedback? That there's a few, and Rita's going to give us some examples. So this is really that if we're only giving summative feedback, taking action doesn't happen, because we aren't able to have that conversation, to build a space in the learning environment for us to be able to take action with our feedback, to generalize it, to use it to improve in other situations, which is where there can be some issues if we give feedback and it's very like grammar focused, or, you know, like, so it's very, very specific to that specific assignment. It's hard to generalize that because the way that you write things, you know, is going to change. So they're unable to take action when key assessments are at the end of the course, and they are not given opportunity to generalize. Clearly, I forgot what was on the next bit of this slide because I just said that stuff. So beautiful. All right, Rita will be able to give us examples.
All right, so the next one, in terms of taking action, I use the work in progress. And so this one, for example, I use it with the students when it comes to presentations. Probably in everyone in one of the courses has a presentation at the end of the term. So what I do perhaps a few weeks before the students do the final presentation, I give them the opportunity to present their work in progress. And I guess the label of work in progress enables the students to or to give them the permission to present a portion of the work. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be finalized, which means I encourage the students perhaps to present sections that they want feedback on, or perhaps they're puzzling questions. And so in this way, the presentations are done in class with their classmates. At times, well, this term in T2, I had academic colleagues that were invited, so they also gave their own feedback. And it is an opportunity, again, for formative feedback where the students can take on board, if they want, if they wish, to take on board the feedback and then integrate it and implement it in their own final work. The other thing is what Lucy was commenting before about supporting the students on how to generalize the learning lessons from the feedback that they have received. And so usually I might just ask them to identify 3 things that they have learned. And this strategy, what it does, it enables the students, of course, to have a reflective process on what did I learn through this feedback and how can I integrate it in my future work. It enables the students to close the loop as well, which is quite important, rather than, as Lucy was saying, hoping that the students might do something with the feedback. And so in terms of this type of feedback is what we call the forward feedback. So how the feedback given can actually be used to improve the quality on my own work. Thank you.
So yeah, and that could be done prior to the term ending. You could give students, it might be that you use a scaffold throughout the whole term and you that they have that 3 things that they learn, and then you might remind them, hey, before you get your final results, or when the results are released, send them an email or a Teams or a Discord or whatever platform you're using to engage with your students. Remind them, hey, you should be doing this with your final one. Whether or not they read it, that's fine, but if we've been doing it throughout the whole term, then that's something that they can then do as well. So what we're actually going to do now, because we have a little bit of time, I just want to take just a couple of minutes for anyone in the chat, in the room. Are there ways that you support feedback literacy in your settings? So it might not be that it might be something that you didn't realize before this workshop that it was supporting feedback literacy, but now when we were talking about an aspect, you might go, oh yeah, I do that. I achieve that through that. You don't have to tell us what aspect or anything, just what are some ways that you provide feedback, that you support feedback, that you seek feedback, that you work with students? Does anyone have anything either in the chat or yeah?
I think similar to what Rita said, for establishing a relationship makes them open.
Sorry, I'm just holding the laptop here.
Establishing a relationship makes them open to reading the feedback and listening to the feedback. So if you use their names in large classrooms, I know, but even if we're just giving written feedback, you can look at the put their name in. Thank you for the submission, Matt. And then it goes a long way, just opening that window or that door for them to get it.
Amazing. Sorry if people online missed the start of that. I ran over with my laptop, hopefully in time. This no room mic is very annoying. And actually, just to generalize a bit of feedback, this is something, if you record your lectures and things, something to be aware of. If you also don't have room mics, to use a lapel. So then, because I noticed both Rita and I are very mobile, so I do apologize to the people online. Hopefully you could hear most of us, and the subtitles will hopefully have helped. Does anyone online have any ways that they support feedback in their settings? Oh, beautiful. So much easier with smaller classes, but giving students the opportunity to ask questions about their feedback goes a long way for, it's going up, for students to reinforce their understanding and limit misconceptions. Beautiful. Like, let students know they can actually question it, because, we're not giving grades with no justification. So we often, we can do that. Peer review of student work, where we review volunteer submissions in the tutorial. Amazing. And what a great opportunity for students to choose to seek that feedback. And then if someone's a bit too shy to do it, they have that back and forth. Doing thumbs up, neutral, or down to check in during lectures and redirect wrong thinking from student comments. Amazing. Such a great form of informal feedback, especially with large cohorts. You could do that with 1,000 students in the room. Thumbs up, thumbs down, neutral. And then, is this clear? Have I explained this clearly? And then if you haven't, explain it another way. Beautiful. And then Stuart has put a link in. I mean, just based on the link text, Stuart, that looks like you're trying to spam us. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that's, for anyone that didn't hear that online, there's a
ball or cube, and then you throw. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shoot it for large class.
Yeah. So yeah, you can chuck a ball that has a mic in it. So that's great. I apologize, Stuart. You're not trying to scam us. It just it's a very odd link. Beautiful. Yeah, that's really cool. And I think we actually have some at UNSW. There was a tech innovation thing earlier this year in the Commons, and they had some of those. So yeah, definitely worth looking into. Okay, beautiful. So now that we've shared a few extra things, we're going to have a bit of a reflection. We've got another Miro. This one is super, super basic. It literally just says put a post-it note with one thing you've learned or one thing you're going to try. Yeah, beautiful. The effect element. Yeah, an effect to me seems like one of the harder ones because it's that we can't control other people's emotions. And I mean, sometimes I can't control my own emotions. Sometimes I get feedback for things and I get real sad. But, you know, and sometimes that is dependent on the student's individual circumstances as well. So like if we think about if there's, let's say, some global event, like let's say a natural disaster or something, and the students are getting their feedback like right then the outside world is going to impact their affect. It's going to impact how they interact with the feedback. So, you know, this is something as well, if we know our students well and they have this very negative reaction and normally they're a bit more chill, that also helps us to go, oh, maybe I should refer them across to ELS or chat to them and check in how they're doing. You know, that the relationship really helps us to do all of that. Okay, beautiful. Feel free to keep adding. Oh no, Miro isn't working, Karen or Karen. So I want to be more intentional with my planning and teaching of the use and importance of feedback. For instance, incorporating reflection into the end of the tutorial workshop and giving students discussion time with their feedback and peers. Yeah, beautiful. That's amazing. And yes, that is, while we do generally do informal feedback, actually building space into your lesson, whether it's tutes, lectures, workshops, labs, whatever, building in that space for it. And speaking of building in space for feedback, please give us feedback. Wouldn't be much of a feedback literacy presentation if we didn't ask for feedback. So yes, we would appreciate your honest and constructive feedback.